Welcome to Chapter 2, Section 6. Our objective for this lesson is to learn to add and subtract fractions with unlike denominators, and our essential question, how do I calculate with rational numbers? There are two methods you could choose from when trying to add and subtract with unlike denominators. Method 1, find a common denominator by multiplying one denominator by the other denominator. This works every time. It's a pretty simple method. The only downfall is that the numbers can get fairly large to work with. Method 2 is that you find the least common denominator. This will assure that the numbers stay as small as possible. Here's an example using method 1. Adding 1/8 plus 2/7. We would choose 8 and 7 to multiply together. So we would multiply our first fraction by 7 over 7, our second fraction by 8 over 8. That turns into 7/56 plus 16/56. And what we remember from the previous lesson, if you add with common denominators, you simply add the numerators, 7 plus 16 to get 23, and the denominator remains 56. Of course, we always simplify, but in this case, 23 and 56 cannot be reduced any further. Let's try method 2. 1 1/6 minus 1 5/8. First, we need to turn these into improper fractions. It gets too messy when we have to try to borrow from whole numbers. So instead of using the whole numbers and mixed numbers, we turn these into improper fractions. Remember, we use what's called the cloud method, if you've heard that before, where we take and multiply the whole number times the denominator plus the numerator. So we multiply, and then we add, and then our denominator is the same as what it started with. So a second fraction here, 1 times 8 plus 5. It starts to look a little bit like a cloud. That's why I've heard it called the cloud method before. So 1 times 8 is 8, plus 5 is 13, and 8 would be the denominator. Okay, so now we have 7/6 minus 13/8. So if method 2 would tell us to find the least common denominator. So let's look at the multiples of 6 and 8 so that we can find that number. When you're looking for a common multiple, you have to just list out numbers for a while until you see one that they share. So with 6, we might go 6, 12, 18, 24, and 30. 8, we might go 8, 16, 24, 32. And as soon as you run into that 24, you know that that's the least common multiple. So let's multiply to get those numbers to become 24. That means we have to multiply the first fraction by 4 over 4 and the second fraction by 3 over 3. So 7 times 4 is 28, 13 times 3 is 39, and we have common denominators of 24. Subtracting with common denominators, we subtract the numerators. 28 minus 39 gives us a negative 11, and of course the 24 remains the same. 11 is a prime number and does not go equally into 24, so negative 11/24 is simplified. Let's evaluate. 5/9 minus a negative 7/12. Minus the negative, turn that into a plus sign right away. 9 and 12, if we were to list out common factors, or excuse me, common multiples, the first multiple we would find would be 36. So we multiply the first fraction by 4, second fraction by 3. That turns into 20/36 plus 21/36. We add those together and get 41/36, or 1 5/36. I'm really okay with you leaving them as improper fractions. We don't use mixed numbers very often, and as you get into algebra, you'll use improper fractions almost every time. So when I say simplify, that doesn't mean you have to turn it back into a mixed number. Now this is an example where using method 2 helped out a lot. Had we multiplied 9 and 12, we would have been working with fairly large numbers. You're not required to follow one method or the other. It's totally up to you, whatever makes the problem easiest for you. Two dancers are making necklaces from ribbon for their costumes. They need pieces measuring 13 3/4 inches and 12 7/8 inches. How much ribbon will be left over after the pieces are cut from a 36-inch length? This is more likely the type of problem you'll see on an MCA test or in real life. So these are the reasons why we have to know how to work with fractions. So step one, we have 36 total inches, and they're cutting 12 7/8 and 13 3/4. So this is a subtraction problem. So the first thing we need to do is turn these all into improper fractions with common denominators. Okay, so where does the 288/8 come from? That's giving 36 a denominator of 8. That means 36 times 8 is 288. 12 times 8 plus 7 would give us 103/8. And then 13 times 4 plus 3 gives us 55/4. The reason we put an 8 under the first fraction was so that we knew that we could turn the 4 into an 8 by doubling those numbers. So we have 288 minus 103 minus 110, and it'll be over a denominator of 8. When you subtract those, you get 75/8 or 9 3/8. So there will be 9 3/8 inches of ribbon left. Make sure your Cornell notes are filled out completely. That includes the warm-up. Review your notes, complete the summary before class, and come prepared to take a lesson quiz on how well you understood the material.